You applied to go to the academy and actually ended up being accepted and attending the academy in 2011, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And your attorney had asked you about going through the application process at the academy, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You were asked a series of questions during the application process, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you were specifically asked if you had ever been intoxicated from the consumption of alcoholic beverages such that if you had driven a motor vehicle, you would have run the risk of getting a DWI. And if so, when was the last time? And your answer was June 5th, 2005, is that correct?
If it's on there, that would be correct.
That was on February 1st, 2011, correct?
The application,
The date you filled out the form for the pre-employment questionnaire.
whatever the dates would be on there, yes, ma'am.
And on that same day, during the application process, you told someone else that the last time you were too drunk to drive was December 31st, 2010, correct?
If that's what it says on there, yes, correct.
And you told that person that you estimated being in that condition not more than 20 times in the past 12 months, is that correct?
If it's on there, that's correct.
One of your attorneys asked you questions yesterday in here to the jury about what happened on September the 14th, 2013, right?
Yes, ma'am.
During the early part of your testimony, your attorneys asked you if you learned about the use of force. And you said you did, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you said you learned about using deadly force, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Because you went through the VLAT classes, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You took arrest, search, and seizure and constitutional law, right?
Yes, ma'am.
That class started the first week of the academy, right?
I'm not 100%
It was early
sure.
on, right?
Yes.
And you learned in that class, and you were tested on it, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You learned that deadly physical force is limited to 4 situations, right?
Yes, ma'am.
To defend yourself or somebody else from what you reasonably believe to be use or imminent use of deadly physical force, right?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Or to prevent the escape of a suspect from custody when you believe they are trying to escape using a deadly weapon, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Or to arrest or prevent escape of a person when they present an imminent threat of death or serious physical injury, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And then the 4th one really didn't apply to CMPD officers, but that's for correctional officers, for someone who is escaping while they're incarcerated for a felony, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you learned in that same class that if the threat is just a physical injury, only non-deadly force can be used, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You reviewed that same information in your firearms training, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you reviewed that same information in the subject control and arrest techniques class, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you reviewed and learned in the domestic violence response class that self-defense must be no greater than is necessary to fend off the attack, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, in addition to your BLET training, you had other training, right? You had in-service training too.
Yes, ma'am.
And during the BLET training, well, let me ask you this. You also had learned through BLET training and in-service training, you also learned the same information again through your directives, right?
Yes, ma'am.
The directives on use, your limitations on use of deadly force is exactly the same as what I just read to you from the constitutional law class, right?
Sounds like it, yes.
And that you can use force, but only non-deadly force when the threat is just physical injury, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Your directives say the same thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Where are the civilian directives?
I'm sorry, I don't understand that question.
Is there some set of directives that people who are not police officers learn how they're supposed to react with a police officer?
Yes, one sustained.
A police officer's job is to help people, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And to keep us all safe, right?
Yes, ma'am.
That includes victims,
Yes, ma'am.
that includes irresponsible people,
Yes, ma'am.
and that includes even people who do commit crimes, right?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
People can walk away from a police officer, right? You're told that.
Yes, ma'am, they can.
They can even run away from you, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, if you actually have probable cause, you can tackle them, but you cannot use deadly
Actually,
force.
all else sustained is to relevance of that particular question.
In some instances, you might be able to tackle someone, but you're not able to just shoot them because they run away.
Objection sustained.
Your attorney asked you about having BLET training, and then he asked you if you had any martial arts training, right?
Yes, ma'am. He asked me if I had any expertise in martial arts.
Right, and you're not, right?
No, ma'am.
But you did go through SCAT training, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And in SCAT, you were taught how to punch people, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You were taught how to use a cross and a jab and a hook and an uppercut, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And an overhand and a knee spear and a lower leg kick, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And a shin kick and a bent wrist and an arm bar, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And an elbow strike and a palm heel strike and a closed fist punch, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You were taught how to fight in SCAT, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You were taught how to use your personal personal weapons, your hands and your feet, and your knees and your elbows, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You learned how to use a taser, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You learned how to use impact weapons, and those like your baton and your flashlight, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you were taught how to maintain control of your firearm, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You had a whole section on weapon retention, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Maintaining control when you have it unholstered. That's a whole section of training on that, true, also, right?
Yes, ma'am.
There was a section on maintaining control of your firearm when it's unholstered and you end up on the ground, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You were taught boxing and clinch drills, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Baton drills,
Yes, ma'am.
grappling training.
Yes, ma'am.
You went through the red man drill and the force on force drill, right?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And after all of those things that's required by the state, you had additional time in training because COPD gives you more training in SCAT, right?
I guess they give us more than others, I'm not sure.
So you were also given more weapon retention techniques, including what to do when your gun is drawn, right?
Like I said, I'm not sure if we had more of that than the average officer. I don't know. Yes, ma'am.
You were taught about movement techniques to use when you're on the ground with a citizen if you had your gun out, right?
I guess.
You were taught escapes and reversals from the ground.
Yes, ma'am. Shrimping, stuff like that.
You were taught how to use communication to resolve confrontations, reducing the need for force, right?
Yes, ma'am.
That would mean you had to speak to the person, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You were taught in taser training that your own belief that a person may attack you if they get close or they might have a weapon does not even allow you to use a taser, much less a firearm, right?
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
You were taught that your own belief that somebody may attack you if they get close or might have a weapon does not even allow you to use a taser, much less a firearm, right?
I don't recall that section. I mean, if you believe someone has a weapon and they're disobeying your commands and you tell them to stop and they don't, then you have the right to tase them.
Now, first, I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 220. You can take as much time as you want to look over it. I can direct you to
Yes, that'd be
the
great.
questions if you want. On pages 2 and 3. I'm going to ask you about those if you want to review those first. So what you just looked at is the 2013 in-service training that you had in August, a little more than a month before this happened, right?
Yes, ma'am.
In that training, you learned just because the officer believes that a suspect may attack him if he gets close enough to go hands-on, or that a suspect might have a weapon, is not sufficient to justify use of the taser pin.
That is what it says in that manual. May I say one more thing? May I?
If it's explaining your answer.
You need to explain that answer that time.
I was just gonna,
Make general comments.
okay, I was just gonna say about what Captain Campagna testified to the other day. Okay, if not, that's fine. Okay.
You were also taught in that class that the taser is not 100% effective, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And the officers must continue to develop and maintain other skills that will assist them during the arrest process. And that may include use of empty hand techniques, impact weapon strikes, or the deployment of pepper spray, for example, right?
Yes, ma'am.
It did not say you get to use your firearm. did it?
It does not say that in the manual, no, ma'am.
You were asked yesterday by your attorney about if you're ever instructed or trained to fire warning shots. And you said no, and you're not, right?
No, ma'am.
But you are trained to communicate with people, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, your presence being there and the fact that your car says police on all four sides, that helps with, and your uniform, that helps with the presence, right?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
But you're actually supposed to use your communication skills throughout the entire use of force continuum, right?
Yes, ma'am.
The purpose of that is to reduce the need to use force and to reduce the chance of injury to you and to the other person, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You were asked about your uniform and your equipment that you have, right? You were asked about that yesterday?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, first. Remember talking about when you get ready to go to work every day, the first thing you do is put on your bulletproof vest?
Yes, ma'am.
You remember talking about showing the jury your utility belt that you put on?
Yes, ma'am.
Talked about you have a radio to use, right?
Yes, ma'am.
The baton?
Yes, ma'am.
You have OC spray over there somewhere too, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You had a taser?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
You had a firearm?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you see any of those things on Jonathan that night?
I couldn't see if he had anything on him that night.
So you didn't see him with any of those things on that night?
I could not see if he had any of those things that night. No, ma'am.
You also had 2 magazines with 15 rounds each to go in your firearm, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Little had all those things too, didn't
Yes, ma'am, I assume he did.
he? Neil had those things?
I assume he did.
Neil's car, when he pulled up next to you, had police on all 4 sides of the road.
Yes, ma'am.
Your attorney asked you if you worked off duty the night before. You worked off duty somewhere, but that was on September the 12th, right?
Yes, I got off on September 13th at 7 a.m.
So you had from 7 a.m. in the morning until you went on your shift, about 12 hours later, a little more.
Somewhere in there, yes.
You're familiar with the CMPD use of force continuum?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
You were asked about that yesterday too, right?
Yes, ma'am.
The use of force continuum says that for active aggression, at this level of resistance, the subject is intent on injuring the officer, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Meaning they have an immediate means to injure the officer or another person or themselves, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Tells you that you're not authorized to use deadly force in that situation, doesn't it?
Not on active aggression.
You said yesterday that if you would have left your DMVR on, it would have been recording nothing. You remember saying that?
Yes, ma'am. When I pulled up in front of the house, it would have just been recording the front of my patrol vehicle.
If you left it on, it would have recorded Jonathan. Is that nothing to you?
It would have.
Your Honor.
It would have recorded the front of my patrol vehicle and shown Officer Little's patrol vehicle
And Jonathan.
and the suspect coming towards us, yes.
And you have a mic too, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So we would have been able to hear the fact that you didn't say anything to him when you got out, right?
Before I got out of the patrol car?
Yes, sir.
I wouldn't have said anything before I got out of the patrol car.
If you had your mic on, we could have heard everything. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
But you turned it on.
Yes, ma'am.
You said that's what you normally do. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
You were asked yesterday by your attorney if dispatch ever confirmed whether or not Jonathan was armed. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
The fact is, nobody ever said Jonathan was armed, did they?
They did not, but we didn't have any reason to believe that he was not armed.
So you assume every call you respond to, that the person there is going to be armed?
There's a possibility that they can, but this was not ever just any call. This was a priority one break-in entering call at 2:30 in the morning with the homeowner inside the house.
That you said was secure?
It appeared secure once I got on scene, yes.
Where in your use of force continuum does it show that if you respond to a priority one call, that you then get to use deadly force? It doesn't say that, does it?
Objection, Your Honor.
It doesn't say that, but that wasn't the situation.
It wasn't, according to you, important enough to leave your DMVR on, right?
Objection to that, Your Honor. You have a question?
It was not an important enough call to you to leave your DMVR on, right?
The initial call? No.
You were asked if Jonathan ever said the word help to you. Do you remember that?
I do.
And you were asked if he ever said, I've been in an accident to you. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
You were asked if he ever put his hands up like this and surrendered to you, right?
Yes, ma'am.
People are not required to say help to you when you walk up, are they?
No, they're not.
They're not required to throw their hands up and surrender to you when you arrive there in your police car, are they?
No, ma'am. But they are to obey commands.
They can walk away, right?
Yes, in this situation, no. We're investigating a B&E. If he would have turned around and walked the other way, we would need to talk to him.
Now, you don't mean just because you were investigating a crime, people can't walk away. That's not what you mean to say, now, is it?
No, but this particular situation, he matched the description of the suspect from the B&E. He couldn't have just turned around and walked away and us just leave him alone.
Right. And that's the reason when Sergeant Ayler asked you why you felt the need to shoot, that's the reason you gave her, because he matched the description of a B&E that you were investigating, and he didn't stop when you told him to stop. That's what you told her.
I don't remember that being my exact words, no, ma'am.
There were deep ditches out there on Pool Road, right?
Yes, ma'am, there were.
And a dead end at the other end of that road, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So really the only place for Jonathan to go to get help from you was to walk towards you, right?
If he was looking for help,
Yes, sir?
is that what you're asking? If he was looking for help?
Yes, sir.
Yes, he could have walked up to me or sat on the rock or stopped when I told him to stop or got on the ground when I asked him to get on the ground, yes.
Did you seriously just say that walking up to you for help could have sat on a rock across the street from you and waved to say, "Excuse me, Mr. Officer, I need help."
Sustained argument. All right, ladies and gentlemen, at this time I'm going to let y'all take your lunch recess.